Alright, hi. So this is going to be a video of me talking for the next I don't know how many minutes. But what I'm going to be talking about is this book, The Crying of Lot 49 by Thomas Pynchon. And the reason I wanted to make this video is that I've been itching to create something and I'll be doing that very soon, but until then I thought maybe this would be a good option. Also, I recently bought this Zoom H1n, or my mom recently bought me this Zoom H1n, and I wanted to test it out. I'm not yet sure how this is going to assist me in my filmmaking, but so far it seems to be giving me a pretty decent sound quality, so that's good. And lastly and most importantly, I genuinely believe that good literature is capable of changing the way societies think as a whole. And let's face it, our society could do with a little change in thought. I mean, I'm not saying I'm going to facilitate it or anything, but I'm just a guy with a mic, man. Okay, so let's get into this. A little something about the book and the author. Thomas Pynchon is also the author of Gravity's Rainbow, which is popularly considered as the holy bible of postmodernism. The Crying of Lot 49 was my introduction to Pynchon, and I will be slowly working my way up to Gravity's Rainbow because it's an extremely difficult book to read. I mean, there are people out there who've read stuff like Odyssey and Pale Fire and stuff like that and still consider it to be the most difficult book. Thoroughly entertaining and thought-provoking, but difficult. Pynchon has this kind of enigmatic, obscure personality thing going on for him, and I think that has something to do with the fact that there are like barely 2 pictures of him on the internet, so naturally people being people couldn't help they couldn't help but make speculations like he has abandoned civilization and gone to live in the woods, and he's in his 70s, by the way. But upon some research, I found out that all that was just bullshit, because I found out he lives in New York City. You just don't get to hear much about him because he simply doesn't like talking to reporters. And I mean, you can't blame the man for that, right? So the way I thought I will approach this is that instead of trying to review the book, which I'm just not qualified enough to do, or provide any spoilers, even though I don't think this book is spoilable. Instead of that, I thought I'll just talk about what I took from this book and how I feel that the themes that were touched upon in the book fit in the context of my personal life and generally in the context of my society. So communication, or the idea of it, is the central theme of this book. Letters, mails, television and drugs make a regular appearance throughout, sometimes to make a point and sometimes just as a chance occurrence. Our protagonist Oripa Mas fails to have any meaningful communication with anyone she meets throughout the novel, and I can confirm she meets a lot of people. Drugs sometimes provide the illusion of an expanded mind, but eventually the characters under the influence of them become increasingly unable to convey even the most basic ideas, such as this one very funny scene where this character has agreed to be a part of an experiment trying to study the effect of LSD on husbands. That's right, an experiment to study the effect of LSD on husbands. So he signs up for this experiment, and now he's been using LSD for a while. He naturally becomes catatonic, but of course in his eyes he is way more happier and aware than he ever was. So he works for a radio station and works closely with sounds, and is just trying to make this argument that if you pick out pay attention to this, if you pick out any random combination of words and say it out loud, that's his argument, that if you pick out any random combination of words and say it out loud, let's say I'm a little bitch, then anyone who has ever said these words before me or is going to say it at any point in future You can represent this on a vertical graph. You can represent all of these individually on vertical graphs in relation to time, and assuming that time is relative, all these graphs are going to meet at one particular point, which means that whenever I say I'm a little bitch, it's actually thousands or maybe even millions of people saying I'm a little bitch all at once. Yeah, which is an interesting thought, but I mean, it's still so sad because he believes that he's making a very intelligent point, but the person who has to listen to him say stuff like that, especially when that person is his wife, I mean, you just end up believing like you have lost this person forever. Because he's saying these things in all seriousness, he's not joking at all. And this particular scene caught my attention because I tried to show something very similar in one of the scenes in my previous short film. So if you guys are interested, it's there on my IGTV. It's true though. They're working on these elaborate machines to give you the illusion of like walking or talking and eating and stuff. But in reality, you're stuck in one place for eternity. Also very closely connected to the idea of communication, and I don't want to get into explaining how, is the concept of entropy. People who have studied thermodynamics will probably understand this better, but entropy is a property not only relevant in human matters, but it is the very force which could one day, probably millions of trillions of years from now, which probably is equivalent to universe is equivalent to a very tiny fraction of what we call a second, lead to the death of our universe. That's right, entropy could be the reason our universe dies. So basically, entropy is the amount of randomness or disorder in a system. One day, after all the planets have died and the only giant matter left in the universe are black holes, eventually the universe will reach a point where all temperature is constant, and then a rise in entropy will cause the very last black hole to evaporate, and the universe will enter an era of complete darkness and meaninglessness of time for the very first time. That's a very scary thought and a little difficult to wrap your head around. Except it's really not, because the book uses entropy as a sort of metaphor in relation to communication, wherein an uncontrollable growth in entropy, that is disorder, is going to lead to a closed system, which means that you start living inside your head. So at this point we're talking about communication. So a growth in entropy leads to a closed system, which basically translates to a person spending a lot of time inside their head, and then getting further caught up in this labyrinthine system. You fail to sort out the information you get and start perceiving everything as binary, either this or that, good or bad, left or right. There's no middle anymore, which translates so nicely in this world dominated by computers and technology and everything that speaks the binary language, because now it's no longer limited to computers. Most humans now speak that language too, with a complete disregard for inspecting the middle and a complete focus on just the two extremes. And why not? I mean, it's so easy to take sides. But back to the book. There exists a device called Maxwell's demon, and it's also a real thing, which is sort of an experiment that can possibly violate the second law of thermodynamics by sorting out the information in such a way that you are not constantly moving towards entropy. This again is used as a metaphor here because our protagonist Odipa Mas is going through that exact situation where she needs to sort out the relevant information and discard the irrelevant one in order to get where she wants to get. And so are you as a reader, because Pynchon throws so much stuff at you, so much of it, you need to think and decide which part you should be paying attention to and which part you can just assume is Pynchon attacking your prejudice and your notions you bring as an imperfect human being. And here we are again. That is again a good way to go about life. Don't believe in everything you see or hear. or be quick about forming judgments, or I mean, this is something you could be doing. You could try and get comfortable with the fact that there is this vast expanse of information which you will never have access to, and that is just how it is. Believe it or not, this is only a 142-page book, and so far I have only spoken about my thoughts and takeaways on like 1/5 of the book. And I'll be very honest with you, I didn't even understand 50% of whatever the fuck Pynchon was on about. I don't even know if I managed to do what I set out to do through this, but I hope this got you somehow interested in the book in some way. I want to make 1 or maybe 2 more videos about The Crying of Lot 49, though I am not yet sure if I will. But I would love to know what you guys thought about this, so do let me know. And yep, that's all for now.